Good evening, and welcome to the late night hour. I'm Visage, and you're tuning into my late night show, where the night is ours to explore. Whether you're winding down or just getting started, I'm here to keep you company in the stillness of the dark. Tonight, I have an intriguing story to share, one that weaves tension and mystery, or leaves you curious about what lurks in the shadows. If you have a story of your own, send it my way, and I'll read it for you. So settle in, dim the lights, and let's venture into the enchanting unknown together. The house on Willowstreet. I wasn't supposed to come back. I'd sworn to myself after everything that happened, after the nightmares and the sleepless nights, that I would never set foot into this town again, let alone in this god-forsaken house. Yet, here I was, sitting in my car at the end of that long, overgrown driveway, staring at the rotten husk of a place that had haunted me since I was a kid. The house on Willowstreet. Uncle Henry had died 2 weeks ago, and being his only next of kin, the responsibility handled his estate fell on me. Everyone else had washed their hands of it, too scared or too smart to get involved. They said he died peacefully, in his sleep. Natural causes, the coroner claimed. But nothing about Uncle Henry's life had been natural. And I knew better than to trust that anything in this house would let him go so easily. Rain drummed steadily on the windshield as I stared at that house, dread crawling up my spine like icy fingers. I hadn't been here in over 20 years, but everything felt the same. The same sagging roof, the same gnarled skeletal trees that clawed at the edges of the property. The same darkness that seemed to cling to the house, oozing from it like a magnolin tumor. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, but after a long, shuddering breath, I finally forced myself to get out of the car. I slammed the door behind me, but the sound barely registered against the steady downpour. The air was thick, oppressive, like it was pressing down on me. Each step toward the house felt heavier than the last, and the wind carried a faint, musty odor, the same smell I remembered from my childhood, when I'd been too young to understand what odor that was. Death. The front door creaked open with little resistance, just like it always had. The second I stepped inside, the smell hit me full force. Damp, moldy wood, and something far worse, something sweet and decaying. I gagged, covering my nose with my sleeve. The air inside the house felt thick, suffocating, like I was breathing through wet cotton. It was as though the house had been waiting, holding its breath, until I returned. I flicked the light switch out of instinct, but of course, nothing happened. The power was out, or maybe it had never worked at all in the last few years. I pulled out my phone and activated the flashlight. The narrow beam of light cutting through the dust-choked air. The rooms looked almost exactly as I remembered. Old furniture draped in yellowed sheets. Thick cobwebs hanging from the ceiling, like long-forgotten nooses. And the dark, endless shadows that seemed to swallow the light. I moved through the house carefully in the creak of the floorboards beneath my feet, the only sound breaking in the oppressive silence. Every step I took seemed to echo back at me, as though the house was watching, listening, waiting. The knot in my stomach tightened with every second I stayed in that place. The memories flooding back too fast for me to shove them aside. And then I reached the kitchen. The smell was overwhelming here, thick and glowing, like something had been rotting in the walls for decades. My heart raced as I stood there, flashlight in hand, staring at the basement door. It was slightly ajar, just enough to suggest someone had been through there recently. The sight of the door brought a flood of memories once I've buried so deep that felt like a different lifetime. Uncle Harry never let me near that basement, never talked about what was down there, but I'd seen enough, heard enough, to know something wasn't right. I should have left right then. I should have turned around, walked out the front door, and never looked back. But instead, I reached for the basement door. The handle was cold, almost unnaturally so. I pulled it open, revealing the dark, yawning stairwell. My phone's flashlight barely penetrated the thick shadows from the bottom of the stairs. The air was colder with each step I took, a biting chill that crawled under my skin. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached for the handle, my fingers trembling as they wrapped around the cold iron. The door creaked open. My flashlight caught the glint of glass. Rows upon rows of jars lined up on shelves, a constant suspended in a thick, murky liquid. I stepped closer, squinting at the closest jar, and my blood ran cold. Eyes, hundreds of them, staring, unblinking, from within this murky depths. Some were too large, others too small, and some looked wrong, as though they belonged to things that shouldn't exist. I stumbled back, my breath coming shallow gasps. My hands were slick with sweat, and my phone nearly slipped through my grip. And I heard it. Sound. Scraping. Shuffling sound faintest first, but growing louder. Closer. I swung the beam of light toward the far corner of the room, but there was nothing. The noise grew louder. A low, wet, dragging, like something crawling out from the shadows. Then from behind me, a voice whispered my name. Jason. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat, the beam of light flickering, catching movements in the dark. My name again, this time more insistent, like a low hiss. And then I felt it, a tug on my sleeve. I froze, my breath catching in my throat as something cold and slick warped around my arm, pulling me backward. The grip was tight, unyielding. I screamed, twisting violently, and I saw it. Thin, blackened fingers stretching out from the dark, clutching my sleeve with an unnatural strength. The thing stepped into the light. Its face, grotesque, eyes bulging, and too many of them, blinking in and out of existence. Don't leave, it rasped. You belong here. I yanked my arm back with every ounce of strength I had, but the grip tightened, pulling harder. My sleeve tore, ripping away its grasp, and I stumbled backwards, my heart slamming against my ribs. My flashlight flickered and then died, plunging the room into total darkness. Panic took over. I bolted my feet, barely touching the ground as I scrambled up the basement stairs, my breath coming in short, ragged bursts. I could hear him behind me, skittering, dragging, whispering my name. The walls seemed so close as I slammed into the door at the top of the stairs, fumbling with the knob. My hands shook uncontrollably, but somehow I wrenched the door open. I barely made it into the hallway when I felt something cold graze the back of my neck, a whisper so close it made my skin crawl. Stay, Jason. I turned to slam the basement door shut, but something was there, the shadows watching, eyes, too many of them, blinking, waiting. I didn't wait to see more. I sprinted to the front door, my ripped sleeve flapping uselessly as I fought to undo the lock with trembling hands. It wouldn't budge. Behind me, the whispering grew louder, of voices, more than one, all chanting my name in unison. The door finally gave way. The lock was luckily rusted. I threw myself outside into the rain, gasping for breath, my heart thundering in my chest. I could still feel the house pulling at me, watching me, not wanting to let go. Even as I bolted to the car, the whispering didn't stop. And when I looked back, just for a second, there it was. In the window, standing in the dim light, was a shadow. A shape I knew too well, even after all these years. The same twisted silhouette that had haunted me as a child, creeping through my nightmare, lurking in every dark corner of my mind. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't save you from my uncle.